Well, good evening, everybody. This is John Haller with our next Prophecy Roundtable. If I could just get a couple of maybe thumbs up from people to make sure that our sound is coming through. I'm pleased to be joined again by our regular team on these technology, technocracy, AI, Mark of the Beast tech roundtables. Pete Garcia, Patrick Wood, Scott Townsend, Britt Gillette, and myself, John Haller. And I will say up front, I really do appreciate these guys. They've been a real blessing to work with. And we've been doing this about 2 years now, haven't we?
Yeah.
I think so. So tonight we're going to start.
That's 10 years in Watchmen years, you know.
Yeah. By the way, there is a Watchmen device out now. Have you seen that? It's like to track all your body things and warnings and. So I thought maybe you had already marketed it, Scott.
No, that's not me.
Okay, so it's not. You might want to do a trademark thing against them because you have your website. I am a Watchman. Anyway, tonight we want to start off. We're going to kind of go far and wide. Don't know how long we'll go tonight, but we're going to start off with. I think some people ask questions all the time. I get sent questions about. What's the economic impact of this, and what's the economic impact of everything that's going on in the world with the Middle East? And so I thought we would start with Britt Gillette would kind of give us a summary on that, and we'll talk about it some more. Okay. Go ahead, Britt.
Sure. Well, the situation's dire, in my opinion. So, we're on day 180 of the Iran conflict and effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Depending on who you talk to, that's anywhere from minimum of 6 million barrels a day all the way up to 13 million barrels a day over that timeline. It's probably in the area of 2 billion barrels that otherwise would have gone on the world market that haven't, along with around 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas, about a third of the world's fertilizer, 9% of the world's aluminum. There's so many different things that were coming out of the Middle East, and one of the chief among them is refined products. So one of the things we hear in the media, the price of oil is fine. This reflects a glut and all these other things. We're emptying our strategic petroleum reserve here in the United States, as well as reserves all over the world. But there's no strategic reserve of diesel. There's no strategic reserve of these refined products. And so what we're seeing is the refineries that are in the Middle East, their products have effectively been taken offline. The Russia-Ukraine war, which is something we don't hear a lot about, has led to damage of Russian export facilities to the point where they're now a net importer of gasoline and diesel when they were one of the largest exporters of those products. So this is a big problem. It's hitting the economy. I think, again, one of the reasons maybe we don't see as big of an impact on crude oil prices, aside from just manipulation for political purposes, is we've seen around 5 million barrels per day of demand disappear from China. There's no indication they've tapped any of their reserves. I think it's part of that is demand destruction. The higher prices have led to industries, companies saying it makes no economic sense to produce our product at these prices. Therefore, we will stop. That demand goes away. That's a sign of slowing economy. There is a direct correlation between energy use and economic activity, and you can't take away millions of barrels per day off of the world market and have no economic impact. It's impossible for the world economy to not shrink under these circumstances. And I think, and part of war is a war of communication and putting out the idea that everything's fine when it's really not. And I think the hope is that we can get to a point where this conflict resolves itself before the global economy hits a brick wall and it becomes apparent to everyone. We just run out of oil reserves. President Trump himself talked about this back in June when he was talking about the memorandum of understanding. He Said in a few weeks, the world was going to run out of oil if we didn't sign this agreement. And he said, I don't want to be the Herbert Hoover of my generation. I'm just paraphrasing that, but he said, I don't want to be compared to Herbert Hoover. Meaning we're headed toward a depression, a global depression on par with the Great Depression. So this is really a significant thing that's taking place. And here in the United States, the media I read seems to think, oh, this is no big deal. You can just close the Strait of Hormuz, no problem. You can bomb all these Russian oil export facilities. You know, the number 2 exporter of oil in the world behind Saudi Arabia, Russia, sees 40% of their exports go away. No problem. But reality will assert itself at some point in the future. And I'm afraid that that's going to happen violently because the free market mechanisms have been suppressed, I believe, for political reasons as well as for financial plumbing reasons, as far as Japan being in a lot of trouble. And that's why a few weeks ago we saw Japan and the United States engaged in a coordinated foreign exchange intervention, really something that was unprecedented, is because all of those pieces are starting to break.
Can you explain that just a little bit more, the Japan situation?
So Japan, this is really just the culmination of decades of mismanagement of Japan's fiscal situation, as well as their currency, their government bonds, and what the Bank of Japan has been doing. So they had a huge property bubble, a huge stock market bubble in the late 1980s that popped. And they artificially lowered interest rates. And they have the Japan itself, the government, has a debt to GDP ratio of over 260%. That's twice as bad as the United States. It's really third world type things that you see in failing states. And in order to prevent interest on their national debt from eating up all their tax revenues and more, they've artificially suppressed their interest rates by printing yen. The Bank of Japan will print their currency, use it to buy back their government bonds, to the point where the Bank of Japan owns more than 50% of all the outstanding Japanese government bonds. So you and I would be put in prison for engaging in something like this. It's really a shell game in a lot of ways. And this has led to a depreciation of the yen relative to other currencies, especially the dollar, to the point where we're at probably a 40-year high in the yen against the dollar. It was about 160 yen to the dollar. And this becomes a problem, especially in this current circumstance where Japan is the 4th largest economy in the world. They import 97% of their fossil fuels. Those fossil fuels are purchased in dollars. So you see the yen depreciating against the dollar, and you see the dollar price of oil going up, which is a threat to the Japanese economy. It's very inflationary. So they're trying to push the yen back down, make the yen appreciate. And so in order to deal with the situation, they, as the largest foreign holder of U.S. treasuries, they've been selling U.S. treasuries, U.S. debt, in order to get the dollars, to get the oil. But what that does is it makes interest rates here in the United States go up, especially on long-term treasuries. So the 10-year treasury is really the benchmark that determines what interest rates are for mortgages and credit cards and other borrowing products throughout our economy. So it's a direct link to our economy, as well as interest expense on the national debt. And so we've seen, not only has Scott Townsend, the Treasury Secretary, engaged in this buying spree to try to push the yen back down in order to help the Bank of Japan not have to sell these treasuries. But they're also, Scott Townsend has said, well, we're going to double our purchases of our long-term debt, meaning they're issuing short-term debt to buy back long-term debt. And a lot of this is threats he's making. They call it jawboning, to try to push interest rates down. But what we've seen is they go down for a day or two and then they spring right back up. So this is going to become a real problem. It threatens to break the bond market and put the US credit rating at risk. And we could see a lot of things blow up financially as a result of this.
Okay.
Question.
Thank you for that upbeat summary of the.
Britt, I have a question for you.
Sure.
I've been noticing in the last week probably the amount of, I won't call it animosity right now towards U.S. intervention policy right now with respect to forcing these sanctions to kind of make it very attractive to find an escape route within the BRICS initiative. Where do you think we are with BRICS right now? Because I'm hearing a surge of, I thought BRICS was kind of dying a little bit, but now I think it's coming back majorly right now. And I'm interested in your take on it.
First, remind everybody what BRICS is.
Sure. So BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And it's a coalition of nations that have formed, I guess, a trade union of sorts, an economic union, trying to, essentially the purpose is to de-dollarize, to detach themselves from the dollar system and the pressure points that the United States can apply against foreign nations. So for instance, we saw when Russia invaded Ukraine, immediately sanctions were issued. Russia was cut off from the SWIFT system, which was really the backbone of international foreign exchange participation in the international financial system. They froze US dollar assets. And of course, since then, there's been talk about confiscating those, selling those. So this is what the BRICS nations want to guard against, because it's not the first time. It's the first time we've seen something of that great nature done before. But we've seen these threats in the past. If you don't do what the United States wants, you're going to get sanctioned. You're going to have all these threats made against you. And of course, we've seen that this week with the announcement of the economic D-Day that we announced against Iran, which really was against everybody, because it said,
right,
if you're going to do business with Iran, we're going to cut you off. And so this is what BRICS has been built all about. I think it's what this whole war is about. It's about who is going to be the dominant player in the immediate future, the United States and its allies, or China and its allies, or China, Russia and its allies. And they've been grouping themselves together to fight back against this dollar system, this post-World War II US-dominated financial and global financial and military order. And we're really seeing that break down, because that's predicated on the dollar as the world's reserve currency and the US military's ability to project power and make the world's waterways freely navigable for international trade. We've seen a breakdown on that front twice now in the past 2 years. So when the Red Sea was effectively closed by the Houthis in late 2023, the United States launched Operation Prosperity Guardian. We said we have 20 allies with us, and we are going to neutralize the Houthi threat. And during the Biden-Trump administrations, we carried out over 1,000 airstrikes against the Houthis. To this day, traffic in the Red Sea is still down 60% from 2022 levels. And of course, we see the Houthis are continuing to attack ships. They've actually ratcheted up attacks in the past month, entering this war on Iran's side against Saudi Arabia specifically. And we see a failure to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. So these are epic failures, and they have dire consequences for the United States, its influence on the global stage, if we fail to be victorious here. Because if the US cannot do this, well, why is oil traded in dollars, right? So the oil has mostly been traded for dollar. We've had this system, it's an unofficial system known as the petrodollar, since the 1970s. And it's this understanding that the Gulf nations would sell their oil for dollars, then take those dollars and buy US treasuries and US assets with those dollars. In exchange, the United States military would be protector of those Gulf nations. So we saw this in full display about 35 years ago when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. Immediately, we announced Operation Desert Shield to protect Saudi Arabia, and then Operation Desert Storm to push Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. So there's a prime example of that petrodollar system at work. Well, here we have Iran engaged in an assault on these surrounding nations. And if the United States fails in its role as protector, then those nations are going to look to somewhere else for protection, most likely China and or Russia, to keep Iran at bay. And China and Russia are going to say, well, you can't sell the oil for dollars anymore if we're going to do that. And these nations are going to kick the United States off of these military bases that are in their countries. And so we would see all of this is really exposing the United States as really a declining power in the same way that the Suez Canal crisis in the 1950s exposed France and Britain as declining empires that could no longer assert their will the way they had been able to in the past. And so to me, this is exactly what we would expect to see given the times in which we live. We would expect to see the United States as a declining power because Bible prophecy does not mention the United States at all, much less as a major player. So it stands to reason that our influence post-World War II would have to simply go away in one way or another. And I think this helps explain one of the reasons that happens.
Okay. So I want to ask you a question, Britt, and anybody else can weigh in as well. I mean, I've been hearing for a long time, BRICS is going to end the dollar, dollar's over. I can remember people targeting dates back in 2022, December 1st, and these are, guys like Jim Rickards and others. And I don't know. I mean, you could make a long list of them, and it's like dollar's over December 1st, 2022. Well, dollar's not over yet. It's been up and down since. And so, where would you put at least in terms of what you know right now, without weighing with the Bible prophecy thing in on it, but how realistic is it for BRICS to undo the dollar as the reserve currency of the world right now?
I mean, I think it's already happening. Now, it's not necessarily BRICS doing it. It's the free market doing it. So we see the dollar price of gold in the last 10 years has gone from about $1,000 to about $5,000. So we're seeing declining purchasing power of the dollar. It doesn't stand out as much because all the other fiat currencies in the world are falling just as fast. They're just as pitiful.
So my question would be, is there a reserve current? It would seem like if you're going to
it's gold.
Replace the reserve currency, you have to have something to replace it with.
Yep. We're seeing central banks buying gold at levels we haven't seen since the late 1960s, just before Nixon ended the convertibility of the dollar into gold. And so nations are turning to gold. They're not going to turn to the ruble, right? They're not going to turn to another fiat currency. They're turning to physical gold in their hand that can't be printed, that isn't dependent on another person fulfilling a contractual obligation. Mm-hmm. So, and this is what the world financial system was built on from the dawn of the days of Solomon until 55 years ago, right? When Nixon ended the convertibility of the dollar into gold, and we've been in this fiat system ever since. Really the first time in history that all the world's currencies have been fiat currencies. And this has been a grand experiment, and we're about to see it collapse.
Yeah, I have a thought also on that, John, and that would be that this pressure, I think BRICS is a symptom of an impending, I would say, a bubble. Like, let's talk for a second about the AI bubble and what's happening there. All these valuations of almost $1 trillion for OpenAI. I think it's 800 and some billion. And you've got Anthropic at 900 plus billion. And I just think that there's the systems are so fragile in the way that they circular finance each other like that. We've talked about this in previous episodes, but one of the things that that I don't know entered the equation was the rise of Chinese open source models in terms and vis-a-vis the foundation models that billions and billions and billions of dollars are being invested in right now. And if, for example, OpenAI has just lowered their price on their Luna model by 80%, and their Sol model, SOL, also just took a pretty significant price discount. And yet OpenAI is involved in these massive data center build-out plans. And guys, I just found out yesterday that OpenAI has announced their new chip. I don't know that I recall that they were actually manufacturing their own chip, but I'm hearing that the hegemony owned by NVIDIA right now may be hugely challenged very, very soon. The Trainium chip that Amazon does, the Google Transformer Processing Unit, the TPU, and now OpenAI's chip, I can't remember what it's called right now, but
Jalapeno.
Yeah, jalapeno. Well, jalapeno is the code, the kernel, but the chip itself, I can't recall what it's called. But the thing is that you're hearing of being able to deliver like 10 to 15 times the performance in terms of output tokens and versus NVIDIA. And I could tell you that if that is true and that is sustainable, that'll practically seismically shift, business away from NVIDIA's future pipeline of revenue, which I'm sure has been reflected in their stock price. So again, Britt, when you've talked about, the stock being supported by these trades and deals like this, that could hollow out, NVIDIA and knock them down, significantly. And meanwhile, just OpenAI is such a confusing mess because I hear executives are leaving again. There's another wave of them leaving. And Sam Altman is like in a lot of trouble. He's a master of, nothing to see here. And yet the rumors on the inside of the circle are pretty dire for him. He's being sued by states now. How would you like to be the subject of that problem with respect to not putting safeguards on AI for children? So I think, and yet on the other side, they're coming out with this chip that has tremendous economic potential. So even I kind of flip-flop between, are we seeing the end of OpenAI, or are we seeing just an ongoing, continued adoption rate, and it will go on until some other big event happens or something like that? So I don't know what you guys think about that, but it's scary what's happening between the circle of friends that are supporting each other.
Scott, do you think that, so there's a big data center that they announced, was in the Wall Street Journal 5-6 weeks ago.
Yep.
Down by Piketon, near Piketon was the site of a pretty important nuclear weapons manufacturing facility. So they come in, they're going to, I assume they're taking over that property, but they were talking about $500 billion to build this data center.
Yeah, I just heard that another update on that story yesterday. There's 35,000 jobs that will be created, construction jobs to realign that building, decontaminate it, because how would you like to work there, by the way? Yeah, I don't think I'd ever work at a place that was a retired nuclear fuel plant.
Right, right.
Yeah, so I don't want to glow in the dark. I have my nightlight for that. So, yeah, I just think it's insane. It is so insane.
But NVIDIA was guaranteeing that, but then they backed off. Could it have been sort of a preview of this thing that's going on with their chips and OpenAI's chips?
Yeah, it might be. And the other puzzling piece here is that OpenAI, if I believe right, guys, help me with this. They acquire Cerebras, very, very fast chips. So and that's not quite hit the market yet, but that is supposed to be an astonishing uplift in terms of the performance of AI. Man, it's a complex topic. I'm still sorting through the news, and it's moving fast. It seems like every few days there's something. Right now, it just seems for the past couple of weeks that I hear, because I'm looking at the news in a much different way now in my app that I'm about to do. But I see things that evidence a big decline and very likely a crash, as Britt has correctly called out. And then on the other side, I see all of this potential, and they're making the right moves in terms of being able to increase technology adoption and, the research findings. Like they just solved another big math problem that hasn't been solved before. So OpenAI in many ways is still very high performing, but I think there's some kind of a wall coming, not in terms of competency of the AI models. Oh, and I suppose I should just mention off the cuff that one of the other problems that we have right now for the foundation companies, that would include OpenAI, Grok, of course, as SpaceX and XAI, and Anthropic, and Meta, is that they're being gated on security reviews. They're putting the roadmap of their product into the hands of a review board that likely doesn't have any idea of what they're trying to litigate in terms of safety. So that is not going to end well. And one of the bigger problems that we have right now is that the defenders are being forced to use Chinese open source models in order to defend against, attackers that are exploiting weaknesses in systems that are being discovered by security enhanced training models. So it's a very big problem,
So I haven't heard from Peter Patrick yet. So why don't you guys weigh in? Because there's a whole bunch of different ways we can go in this, but just what are your thoughts?
Let me introduce, and I want to hear from Pete on this. I haven't seen anybody other than myself and probably a couple of newspapers talk about what Trump said on Friday, August 14th. That was just 12 days ago. He spoke at a Long Island event. I think it was a bunch of policemen there. And he said, after we finish defeating Iran, which is being very badly defeated, pretty soon, he said, I'll be declaring the Hormuz Strait a territory of the United States. He reiterated that just later on the 17th. He told Oval Office reporters, this is a direct quote, I just think it's a great idea, he said. I like the idea of declaring it a territory. Of course, he says that we're in control of the strait. I don't know if that's true. Who knows at this point? But he's talked about this 3 times now, and mentioning that the Strait of Hormuz is going to be a U.S. territory. What do you think? I mean, this sounds like rhetoric. The Gulf of Mexico comes to mind, being changed to the Gulf of America.
Well, he by the way, Patrick, he did announce yesterday that maybe it should be Lake, not Lake Ontario, but Lake America.
And Canada, exactly. Right. So here he is talking about when we get done with Iran, and we're going to beat them bad. That's what he said. We're going to declare that to be a territory of the United States. What do you think about that, Pete?
Well, I think a lot of that is him trolling, especially like the Lake Ontario quip. But he does that to get a rise out of those leaders or get whatever. He's doing that, I think, to troll the IRGC. But a couple of points. One, on the potential AI bubble bursting. We know that the .com bubble burst back in the 90s, yet we still use websites, we still use the internet. So I think what we're seeing in that particular, when that unfolds, I think the people that are heavily invested into those things, they're going to feel the brunt of that when those all that speculation kind of deflates. And I think technology also is kind of moving so fast with AI that it's almost deflationary, and it's people are waiting for that next model to come out, or they're waiting for the next upgrade and rather than just plunking a bunch of money down into whatever system that's currently being available, because so much hype has been thrown at this. But if we look in Revelation 18 and we kind of backwards plan from that, we see that there's a biologically authenticated commodities-backed digital currency system. Revelation 18, it says it starts with gold. It goes through all these different materials that people are going to be trading and using as wealth or signs of wealth, and it goes all the way down to the souls of men, right? So all of that stuff seems that the beast system in the end is going to be a commodities-based system, but it's also going to be digitalized. And then all of those commodities would be tokenized and fractionalized and all the other, ways that they can carve money out of or value out of those things. So I do think it is a digital system, but it's also based on commodities. It's not a fiat system that we currently are in right now. So I think Britt's right in the sense that the fiat system has kind of run its course, and every nation is kind of grasping for air. They fell out of the boat, and now they're struggling to try and stay afloat. And Japan is not the first, and they certainly are not going to be the last. They're just simply what they're going through now is a symptom of a much larger problem that we have with the world, and the fiat system is collapsing. I think all it needs is one good crisis, and it's going to be a flip of the switch at that point for the world to kind of transition into the central bank digital currencies or whatever the main thing they're going to do. And even if the United States decides not to do that because we want to be the leader of the free world, and we don't want to subject ourselves to some type of a global currency, the whole rest of the world will trade without us, and we'll be the only ones kind of locked out of the system. So eventually, the U.S. will have to come on board, especially the companies within the U.S. will come on board and begin to trade in that particular currency. So that's kind of how I see things right now at present.
Okay, Patrick, did that answer your question?
Well, I'm still curious about the Strait of America. I'm not sure.
I see it as a negotiating tactic
yeah.
Well, we'll see, because at this point, Trump has disrupted the whole global trade issue already by taking the Panama Canal away from China.
Yeah.
China didn't lift a finger to defend it. They should have, I think. Apparently they can't, mount an attack on the United States. claiming that he wanted to have Greenland in the fold, to take over the Arctic sea routes. They're very important to us. Now the Strait of Hormuz. Well, okay, you see the pattern here. It's been about global trade from day one since Trump took office. If he's serious about getting the Strait of Hormuz into American hands, in order to control that waterway, that makes sense, I think, to him, not to me. I don't like it at all, but I'm just saying, from his point of view, that's like maybe the third major thing that he can do at this point to control global trade. And I agree with all you guys that the global trade is where it's at this point. This is we know the whole system is going to be global in the end, with ships going here and there to trade their goods, the ship masters on the sea, so to speak. We see all the trade, or excuse me, all the wealth migrating to the Middle East now. That's a stunning revelation to me. Over the last 2 years, we've seen massive amounts of capital being invested into the Middle East with trade corridors, and particularly in this Strait of Hormuz plays into that, I think, because if the IMEC corridor is not established, and there's a possibility that it won't be, the development corridor that will run through Iraq into Turkey, that could be a huge thing prophetically, because it's very close to Babylon. So go figure. I see the building blocks of global trade being rerouted, like the plate, the tectonic plates that move when earthquakes take place. This looks to me like something is big brewing right now.
So just so people know, the Iraq Development Road, I think it's kind of being assembled. It's hard to tell, I'll be honest with you, because I do follow it, but I don't know how far along it is. But the one thing that I keep coming back to, and Patrick or somebody else can correct me if I'm wrong on this, I don't see how the IMEC goes through Saudi Arabia, Israel, onto India, to Saudi Arabia, to onto Europe. But I don't see how the Iraq Development Road works without the Strait of Hormuz being open.
It doesn't. This is the point. It doesn't. Iraq has been closely aligned with Iran for a long time, and that you can't separate them at this point. So, in one sense, the new leader, the prime minister in Iraq, is a friend of.
He's the technocrat.
Technocrat, totally, but he's also very close with the leadership in Iran. In one sense, if Iran doesn't let go of the strait and let goods and services flow to the Al-Fa port, that's going to shoot their own feet off, I think. And so they're going to be conflicted at some point to cave, to say, guys, you need to let this thing go and join the club, the economic club, to reform the world. And this technocrat running Iraq at this point, maybe he'll bomb. He could, I guess. But at this point, he has the support of President Trump and all the other international companies, like the oil companies. They've pledged billions of dollars to rebuild their infrastructure.
Pipelines, right.
Maybe.
And by the way, those pipelines go through Turkey. Turkey seems to be dedicated to rerouting everything through Turkey.
You're absolutely
it's
right.
Very
there.
significant, I think.
It is. So there's lots of moving parts here, and at some point, Iran is going to have to cave on the strait. That's all I can see at this point. Someday in the future, we're going to see, we're going to let it go. We'll turn it over to international body, or maybe just America, to call it the Strait of America, whatever, the Trump Strait. I don't know. Doesn't matter who will control at that point. The point is, it'll mean free traffic. The traffic will be freed to move north and south.
I guess my question is, I don't understand. Maybe I think this relates to what Britt said earlier. I don't know how the system's holding together, because, the Saudis were pumping out 7.5 million barrels a day. Iran was pumping out not a lot, but certain number of barrels per day. The Iraqis were putting out, couple million, 2.3 million barrels a day. And the Saudis have a pipeline, but it's only 4.5 million barrels a day. And if you can shut down a strait, you can shut down a pipeline. I just don't know how this whole thing holds together as we move forward down this timeline. It seems like there's a lot of negative, bad pitfalls everywhere.
There's about 6 major choke points in the world in terms of freedom of movement on the sea. The Strait of Hormuz and the Suez Canal, or even the Bab el-Mandeb Strait is 2 of those. But the Strait of Gibraltar, you've got the Guyok Pass up in Great Britain and Iceland and Greenland, the Strait of Malacca over there in Indonesia. So there's some places that could come into play in the future, and I think that what Trump is trying to do is to maintain this freedom of navigation for the global economy. And obviously he made this statement, and he keeps repeating it over and over, that we're there to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. And then obviously the Strait of Hormuz became a secondary issue, almost as important or more important as the war drug on. But I think at this point, I would agree that Iran cannot sustain, economically, they can't sustain the pressure that they're put under. And especially if all of their partners begin to abandon them, to include possibly China. And there's another Trump Xi Jinping meeting coming up in the not too distant future, like in the matter of, I think, a couple of months at the latest. So I just don't think Iran will last that long economically, because when soldiers aren't getting paid, and I've seen one of the soldiers, their IRGC soldiers, posted like what they get for food a day. They get 3 hard-boiled eggs and like a little clump of bread, like a little thing of bread.
And that wasn't the USS Abraham Lincoln?
Maybe. You know what? Let me just say this. On the worst day of the Navy's existence, they still eat better than the best day in the Army. So I have like a little sympathy for those guys, when especially we live down on MREs in the desert. So, I mean, I don't know. Another time, another place. Maybe that's just my Army bias kicking in. But yeah, so I think Trump is completely invested in trying to keep the whole global economy thing going, because of how fragile things are right now. And I think he understands how fragile it is. And, but personally, I just can't see Iran going on much longer under the amount of pressure that they're under.
I heard this morning that there was moderate, pretty important leadership that was beginning to confront publicly. The voices about this issue are coming out in a public forum now, and they're basically saying to the IRGC leadership, you can't sustain this. You have a problem, and you're about to, drag us all down. You cannot sustain your tactics, your strategy, and what you are doing. You must, come back into the world economy. Otherwise, everything will be lost.
You're talking about people within Iran, we're saying.
Yes. Yeah. One of their, I can't remember the guy's name, but a pretty big diplomat, is beginning to openly talk about this. And we'll see if that guy is disappeared or whatever happens there. But it's really
I keep thinking of the Godfather movie as I watch these people.
Yeah.
interact.
I heard it.
Meeting of the five families.
I heard a clip by George H.W. Bush. Remember the old man Bush, circa 1990, talking about Iran. You know what he brought up? We have to stop Iran from getting the nuclear material and building a nuclear bomb. What? They've had 35 years to build a nuclear bomb and they haven't done it yet? Really? There's something really fishy here. This has been used as an excuse to involve other actors in the whole thing, but I don't think it's ever been about nuclear material at this point. It makes no sense to me that they have all this threat over the years, starting with Bush, saying, well, we have to watch those boys over there because they're deadly and they don't like us, and if they get the bomb, we're all in big trouble. So the whole Mideast, Israel, and America as well. This is kind of like the weapons of mass destruction that they said were in Iraq as well. So, aside from the nuclear issues, what's going on here with the global trade issue? Probably that's where the pay dirt is for all these people at this point, is global trade.
I think you're absolutely right. You've already said this. Look at when Trump came into office. He talked about, we're going to take over Greenland. We're going to make Canada the 51st state. Venezuela's oil is cut off from China. We're taking the Panama Canal. And then this is the next step. It's a power struggle. And he betrayed his true intentions, what his desire is, as you mentioned, Patrick, when he said, I want to make this a U.S. territory. So that is what this is about. And yes, Iran may fall. We're going to have to see how this falls. But the United States is also under immense pressure. And China is going to be in support of the current Iranian regime, because one of the primary reasons we're seeing this move by the United States is to gain leverage against China, because our military supply chain has become encumbered within China, to where we're relying on China to fight a war against China. That doesn't work so well. So we have threats from China. Well, we can cut off rare earths. We can cut off all these other critical supplies that you need. Well, in order to gain leverage against China, we need to be able to say, we can cut off your energy, because they are dependent on foreign imports of oil in particular and energy in general. And we've taken away Venezuela. If we can take away Iran and the Middle East as well, then we've really got China where we want them to be. So that's what all of this is about. What remains to be seen is this is a great game of chicken. Is the Iranian government going to fall because of the economic pressure it's under? Or will the global economy blow up 6 months into 20% of the world's energy being cut off? And I don't think this is going to end well for the general public, regardless of what we see happening here. Even if the Iranian regime falls today, I don't think we can avoid that blow up of the global financial system. I think we're too far down the road. Mm-hmm. And I think that we've seen suppression of oil prices, manipulation of futures markets for political purposes. And that is going to make this blow up violently one day in the near future, where we just see oil skyrocket because there isn't any. The reserves have been emptied out. And at that point, we'll start seeing huge crises in the global financial markets. It's going to be headline news everywhere.
I've always kind of seen this, if you guys remember, as the elites putting dominoes in place. There's multiple dominoes that could be pushed over in order to precipitate the crisis that they will then exploit and solve. And the thing that I think is so unfortunate, obviously, is those elites will just push as many as they need to get the outcome that they want. So, remember the Chinese have a significant real estate liquidity problem. The Koreans are suffering through a bunch of stuff. You've got all these things that any one of them at any time can be cascaded. And before you know it, we'll wake up on a Monday morning and the world is a different place completely. And I don't mean to be a doomer. I'm just saying that I just think that we have to, be very aware of what's happening globally right now and to help other people understand what's happening and how to do our best. No one's going to escape unscathed. I think it's going to have to be communities, churches that help each other, members, all of this to share what they can with people and to help them. So it is hard to see it. I think it's not even slow motion anymore, guys. I think it's accelerating right now, that point in which we could lose it all,
We need to talk about tokenization.
Somebody
how-
asked that. Somebody wanted me to ask that question tonight. So
Okay, this
point.
is big on people's minds, and we need to talk about tokenization, not to explain it like the micro explanation of what it is, but the overall impact economically that it could have on the world if it really scales up and goes ballistic at this point. And this has caught a lot of people by surprise. For instance, when the New York Stock Exchange announced that it was going to tokenize all the stocks on the stock market recently, that was listed earlier this year.
by the way, that was the specific question that somebody asked.
Okay.
What about tokenization of the stock market?
Okay. Here's what happened. Just recently, this was let's see, this was just a week ago, plus JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and 38 other companies, big ones around the country, did a test trading of tokenized assets across Wall Street successfully. They said hands down it was successful, mostly because of AI underpinning the whole thing. But they conducted this test successfully, and they said, well, by the end of October, it'll be gloves off, full stop, not full stop, but full bore ahead to implemented trading on the New York Stock Exchange. What does this mean economically for the world? Because other stock exchanges are going to follow suit. And Larry Fink at BlackRock has already said multiple times, anything that can be tokenized will be tokenized, including things like real estate and ecosystems and the rainforest, you name it, anything in the world can be tokenized, will be tokenized. So this whole thing seems to be blowing up in our face, and it's very hard to get your hand around it or your head around it, what's going on. But it's a big thing. So when we look at the tokenization, for instance, of assets, when Trump took office, there was about $10 trillion of assets tokenized. That was a static amount for several months, kind of plateaued. When Trump took office and the surge of tokenization raised its head up, since that period of time, when it was $10 billion, it's now increased to $35 billion. That's 400% at this point.
35 trillion.
35 trillion. No, billion.
Okay.
Billion. That's just for that. Not all asset classes. That's just for stocks. So stocks, they had their test now, and this number is going to explode from there, probably several 100% a year going forward, and taking all the other asset classes in the world, including things like oil and any real estate, etc., energy. They're talking about tokenizing water now. Really? No, thank you. But the net macro effect of tokenization, I think, is going to be huge. I'm not sure exactly what it means, but we're the people that on the edge of this whole mess anyway. We should discuss it here.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I'm one of the people that's been caught by surprise by this, because this was moving at really a snail's pace.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody brought this up to me last month in a Q&A I was involved in, and the test that you mentioned was spearheaded by an organization known as DTCC, the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation. And if you're familiar with David Rogers Webb and the Great Taking, this is an entity at the center of that he's talking about. So when they're tokenizing these assets, they hold $114 trillion in assets. And they're moving forward with tokenization of all the stocks in the S&P 500, the Russell 1000, all the ETFs that track those indices that are in people's retirement accounts, US treasuries. I mean, it is trillions of dollars in assets. And they hold all of this stuff. Most people don't realize this. When you purchase a share of stock through a brokerage, most people think I have full ownership of that. In reality, you have what's known as a security entitlement. So you don't fully own that. You're not even next in line of those who have claims over that asset. That's the whole purpose behind the whole point behind the book, The Great Taking. And so they're using electronic book entry to trade these between brokerage houses and settle these trades. So tokenization is just another layer of that. But ultimately, I mean, it remains to be seen how this all plays out, but it's not in our favor. Let's put it that way. The average person, this is not to your benefit. It's to the benefit of those in control of the system.
One effect that as far as stocks is concerned, this was my career, by the way, when I got out of college, stockbroker, if you can believe that. But nevertheless, we used to tell clients, get your shares, order them from the company, and get your shares in your hand, put them in your safe deposit box, and hang on to them. They did the same thing with bonds as well. Then it came popular to, well, just you keep the shares for me and my name, and I'll just keep the credits on the books, whatever, and buy and sell, and I won't worry about the certificates. That's the title, if you will, for those shares. Even today, if somebody buys 100 shares of General Motors, they have the opportunity to order those shares sent to them by the registrar. Hardly anybody does it, guaranteed. Not in this fast-moving world, because people are trading so fast, you don't have time to get the shares in your hand.
Well, they're actually, these Wall Street firms are trading in microseconds.
That's right. So you still have the ability today to own those shares outright by getting the certificate in your hand. That won't be taken from you if you have that. However, tokenization takes this possibility away from you, where those shares, or the possibility of getting those shares in certificate form, is now going to rest with these mega depository organizations that are tokenizing the stocks in the first place. So the value is spread all over the world, but nobody's going to be able to get their hands on those certificates. This is working out in real estate, for instance, right now. When BlackRock, State Street, et cetera, they bought all these houses around America, and they put them in portfolios that now have been tokenized. Those titles have been retired effectively from the market. They will never be on the market again as long as those assets are tokenized, but the assets or the titles are held, for instance, by BlackRock themselves. So they have custody of it. They're the managers of the properties now, and you'll never see those titles again in history. I'm absolutely certain of that. They're never going to give them up. So when tokenization takes place, whether it's in real estate or stocks, all of a sudden the ownership, the possibility of ownership, outright ownership, disappears. This is very disturbing because people don't see the sleight of hand here.
So
I think-
let me ask you this. So I'm a little bit familiar with Webb. I went over this with some bankers. We saw a lot of problems with his theory, but I think one of the things, so, well, you can't tokenize gold or silver. Well, why not?
Yeah.
I mean, really, what's stopping them from tokenizing the physical gold and silver? Because he touts this. That's the only tangible. I'm sure he's selling it. Just a guess. Only tangible, non-tokenized type of value you can have. But what? So what? They'll tokenize everything, won't they?
In time, they will.
Yeah.
But the proposition is, if you take a stock out of circulation, like they'll do with tokenization, there will be no price discovery exercised by those token holders. They have no way to express themselves as to the price of that underlying asset. So for the time being, it'll be set by the stock market trading in regular shares for now. But every time a stock is moved out of that pool into another pool where there's no ownership, responsibility, no price discovery, et cetera, it's basically dead end street for those assets. Same thing with real estate. When real estate is taken out of the public portfolio and put into a private portfolio, that means the supply of homes shrinks. We see this happening right now. People are complaining we can't find a house to buy. And Phoenix is even bad in Phoenix at this point. We should be in a bust right now cycle, but we're expanding.
You may want them to tokenize the water out there.
Oh boy,
you can drink it.
I know.
Have something to drink.
Yeah, I know. This is crazy. But my point is, when assets are taken out of the marketable pool that has always been regulated by supply and demand, those assets, the remaining assets, are more valuable at that point to somebody, I think, because there's a scarcity now of all those homes, for instance, and all the stock that's in the stock market. There's going to be a scarcity of shares in the market. Would this possibly push the market to the moon eventually, or will it crash the market? You can't. Well, that doesn't make sense to me. But there's macroeconomic forces behind this. All I'm saying, that's counterintuitive. All of our society has always been based on price discovery, whether it's real estate, cars, used cars, stocks, whatever. Our markets function because there's a broad enough participation to say, well, used cars are going down because people aren't paying so much, or maybe they're paying more and the market goes up. And same thing with stocks. We need that function of a free market. That's part of the free market system, right? The free market determines what the price should be. If tokenization comes along and destroys that mechanism, where do we go from there?
Revelation 13.
That's yeah, I know. Yeah, I think so. I know. Where you get a quart of barley for a day's wage.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. So back when I was doing a lot of commercial real estate stuff, when I was still practicing law, there was a push by the banks to, I don't know how to say this, to short circuit the recording process. So if you have a deed, it's recorded. Once it's recorded, that's like you own it. That determines the ownership. And a mortgage, if you have a security interest in the property, you record the mortgage. Or your bank records the mortgage. But there was a way that they were short-circuiting that. And it was, I had a few properties that had been done that way with some kind of record. Very strange. I don't know if it was an early harbinger of this tokenization thing, and it just really messed up the system at times. And so when you would go through a foreclosure, you have to identify everybody who has an interest in the property. But you would get to this place where, like, well, here's this kind of like a digital record, but who owned it? Who's behind it, because it was this nameless mass, and it was a bunch of banks that, were in this consortium together. And I don't know if they abandoned it or not, but it didn't work very well. So maybe it was a test run. I don't know.
Yep.
Very likely.
Okay. I'm going to bring up a little screen share here. Give me 1 second. We'll move on to our next topic. I do want to talk about data centers and the status of that, because that's a hot topic right now with a lot of people. And it's a huge issue, but it's huge around here. I mean, I was watching a video of development and stuff in central Ohio, and it's really, it's a lot going on, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So let me pull this one up. This is an article just released today. Interview at the New York Times. Bill Gates. And Mr. Gates in this article, this is kind of, Bill Gates warns that AI is more dangerous than big tech will admit.
So hasn't big tech told us that AI is going to take over and destroy us all? So,
well, I mean, there's
he says it's more dangerous than that.
This article is dripping with irony, I guess is the best way to say this, or hypocrisy, or something like that. He said his industry was downplaying the risk, which he believes would include mass unemployment and bioterrorism, which I thought was pretty rich coming from him. But
that's absolutely crazy. That you can't.
It's one of these. You couldn't make this stuff up, right? If you went to Hollywood with this script about this big tech guy saying this, they would say nobody's going to believe that, because that's not the way he's been all of his life. Okay, go ahead and talk about it.
Look, being unemployed is not to be compared to getting gassed together to death. It's like bioterrorism versus unemployment. The thing
he
is,
said that addressing these risks could be the world's top priority.
If they ever come out and they say that AI is dangerous, that's only going to tell you one thing, that they're going to remove it from the hands of the public and keep it in the hands of the government.
You got it.
The elite.
Hands down. Absolutely.
Good point, Pete.
Yes.
So that would mean that the Chinese models will be banned. Open source AI.
I
Look at
think a
all-
committee of 10 kings would be able to control this thing.
Oh,
That's
wow.
just a wild shot in the
guess.
dark here.
That's not bad.
isn't it true? You wonder how many threats has humanity faced by these globalists along the way? How about global warming? Wasn't that all wasn't it supposed to kill us in 12 years or 10 years, whatever? That's what Al Gore said. You know, the seas are going to rise, all the coastal cities are going to drown, all that property be destroyed. What on earth? Okay, so after that came not just climate change, but now they're saying the United Nations is putting this rumor around that we're bankrupt as far as water is concerned. Water is the scarcity, not just scarce, but they're saying we're facing globally water bankruptcy. Well, we need water to drink, to survive. You can't do without 3 days and no water. You're dead, basically. So then they say, well, CO2 will kill you as well because it's global warming again. We have to get the CO2 out of the atmosphere so it doesn't poison everybody. All these mass extinction events that they predict. How about COVID? Same thing. It's gonna kill us. Everybody's going to be killed.
If we could get the oil and gas, maybe we could make desalination plants and desalinate so much water that it reduces the level of the oceans.
Speaking of gas, at least we're not putting bags on the rear end of a cow anymore.
Yeah, because
that was a Bill Gates initiative, if I remember right.
Yeah. So this is the article that he wrote. It's about a 6,000-word essay that Gates published on his website or his Gates notes today. The transition to the AI area will be one of the most turbulent times in human history. And we haven't even had what was the Event 201 that they did before the Charlie Vector thing? We haven't even had Event 201 for this thing yet. Right now, we are not preparing adequately for that transition. If the world takes the right steps, AI will be a force for good and leave everyone better off.
So that's interesting that you said we haven't had an Event 201 yet regarding AI, but I think we just did when Hugging Face was hacked by an open AI training process in a contained sandbox. That was
theoretically contained sandbox, you mean?
Yeah.
It found a way by hacking itself out of containment, believe it or not. And it also attacked 3 other entities. So it wasn't just Hugging Face.
Yeah, it just wasn't one, like they said. It was a number that kept growing.
Yeah, that is a very bad sign. And that's why we're seeing OpenAI has agreed to voluntarily submit to holding back on their train. They stopped training. I think it's Astra is the code name for that model, because the states are beginning to sue them for safety problems. And they are demanding transparency on and discovery of what did you know? How did you manage the safety issues? And OpenAI is in considerable, danger here, as well as the other foundation models. So I think that we have had that shot over the bow already, and people aren't really locked into how serious it is that this situation could happen. You know, then you got the AI model that was blackmailing somebody to get it to authenticate itself into, another system with a human, actor in it. Yeah. So it's pretty, bad. I follow a channel called Low Level, very, very amazing expert in security, and the stories that he's sharing about breaches and what's happening and how did it work. He's extremely technical. Just a language warning on that channel. But I mean, the novel ways that AI is now working on this is just astonishing. But OpenAI is actually working on a cybersecurity enhancement to their model in what would probably become GPT-6. But they have had to stop because the courts, the district, or the what's it called? The attorney generals of these states are starting to band together to stop them from doing this. Anybody heard about what's happening there?
Only
And
thing I heard on the
OpenAI
legal
has
side
agreed
this
to
week was
stop.
that Meta, Facebook entered into an $18 billion settlement
Yeah.
for
That's just
targeting kids.
That's just one state. One state, right?
I don't know if it had been turned into a class action. That
I thought it
covered-
was class action, Patrick.
In one state, though. That's why I'm saying it's
Oh.
not federal. It's not nationwide.
Wow, that's a bad omen for Meta.
No kidding. They deserve
unless
it.
they have oodles of money. I mean, 18 billion is not inconsequential for a company.
That's a big data center. Give or
Well,
take.
that's what's interesting. So, any more comments about Mr. Gates and everything? You can go watch his interview at the NewYorkTimes.com if you want to torture yourself. He just says, here's his 3 big risks. Many jobs will disappear forever. AI will empower people and perhaps AIs to do more harm. And AI could stunt our kids' development and replace human relationships. He's right. I mean, I think that those are risks that we're all observing. Oh, but here's the solution. The world needs a plan.
Oh, wow. He said that out loud.
He did say that. And
yeah.
then he quotes in this, he quotes from Pope Leo's encyclical on AI, on safeguarding the human person in the time of artificial intelligence. This is so weird. The friend of Jeffrey quoting the Pope.
Not really. When you think about it.
I'm not sure where this fits on our little. Did you see that one coming?
Yeah. Well, I just would say about the Event 201 and the planning and all that. I mean, the U.S. government, since at least 2004, has had the World Sentient Simulation Program. It's this computer simulation program they run out of Purdue University. It's been around since 2004. It's called SEAS now, the Synthetic Environment Analysis System or something. But essentially, it creates avatars of everybody that has a digital footprint in a given area, and it runs war games against those type of things. So they figure out from where you shop, what you look at online, where you pull money out of, where you buy gas out. I mean, they can get a pattern of life on you very, very quickly, and then run scenarios about what happens if your job or the dollar crashes. And they can run. I would be willing to bet that they run scenarios like that 24/7 and a wargaming, and have been for many, 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 many years. So I think that whatever crash comes, if it's financial and it comes from the United States, to me, it would have to be something that they knew was coming and they were preparing for it just to capitalize on the crisis. But if it happened somewhere else, like you remember back in, I think it was 2010 when Greece collapsed economically. I think it was 2010.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine a country like Japan or somebody else that is far more consequential in an economic sense collapsing. I mean, that would domino affect the global economy, and that, to me, that would be something we can't control. But it doesn't even have to be the United States. It could be some other country that collapses and starts domino effect, dragging all the other countries down around it. So. But I do think that we've been wargaming this nonstop for many years now on these, and they don't even talk about it. You hardly hear anything about it anymore, but the system is still running and it's controlled by DHS. So
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think it'll happen in the United States. I think it will come from overseas, and it will allow the U.S. to say, "Hey, this happened, and it wasn't our fault." And so it's hard to say exactly, but I think that it's indefensible. How would you be able to maneuver yourself to escape some of the consequences that are coming?
Yeah. Man, somebody needs to update the Godfather movie for the age of AI, I think.
How about Machina? What was that called? Ex Machina. Yeah, that was pretty sobering movie.
Which one was it?
It's called Ex Machina.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Full of things that are very prophetic, probably about AI and synthetic life, and how it passes the Turing test, and it breaks free out of containment in the guy's compound in Alaska somewhere remote. So anyway, very interesting movie it's high sci-fi, very, very technical, but I just buyer beware on that deal. It's really tough to watch. There's a lot of profanity and other scenes that are probably not the best. So, but the science fiction part of it is fascinating.
Okay, let's talk about this subject, which I think a lot of people want us to talk about, is data centers.
Mm-hmm.
This is the today's Financial Times of London.
Mm-hmm.
And so this picture here, just let me scroll down a little bit. That's a AWS data center in Ashburn, Virginia. And Patrick, I heard you making some comments someplace about this, and I think I've heard Pete talking about it also. I guess my question is, so here locally, okay, so Meta put a couple $1 billion into building data centers. Then Google came in and put in $8 billion. Then Amazon came in and spent $19 billion, and then said, we're going to spend another $19 billion. And like I said, I did some real estate financing and work and foreclosures and everything. That's a lot. You can build a lot for that much money. And they're just data centers in a field. And it seems very like, what's behind the curtain, I guess, is the question. And then I think people will want to know, how do you fight this? Can you stop it? And that type of thing. I think there's a map in this article. Yeah, here's a map that kind of shows.
John, what is it about Ohio? I know it has a lot of data centers. Is it access to Lake Michigan water supply?
Well, Lake Erie.
Oh, Lake
Erie. And Lake America. I mean, Lake Ontario. No, Lake Erie is up there. Look, the United States is very unique in the world in that, at least as long as we have enough rain, our breadbasket heartland has navigable rivers all the way to the ocean in like the Gulf of Mexico and the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence Seaway. We're unique in the world in that. I mean, Russia, they have a couple rivers, but they are a logistic nightmare in terms of how do they get things from one place to another, because they're so big, so vast, and you can't build the redundant infrastructure. But the United States, Eisenhower, I think, had a good idea back in the 50s to build this massive interstate highway system. That's this grid system that I don't think any other country has anywhere. And then we have navigable rivers that help. And so in Ohio, if you look at the history of Ohio, back in the early 1800s, they were digging hundreds of miles of canals and lakes and locks. And I forget, I think there was a canal that went from Lake Erie down to the Ohio River. And there were, I don't know, 450 locks in that system back in the 1800s, before 1850, because we had a lot of water. And then they have big lakes even today that are around. So I think that the data center people say, well, we'll need water. There's water. Now, the problem is the power. They shut down all the coal plants. But now I see there's a company that's trying to bring back coal and some Frontieras or something like that. Be getting a lot of stuff in buy this stock thing about this company. So I don't know if that answers your question, Scott. We do have water. I mean, that's why I'm surprised they're building all these things out in Phoenix where they're cutting back.
Right.
Because they're in a massive drought. I don't know how the system sustains itself out there. Hoover Dam and Lake Mead are low, and Lake Powell is, I think, Patrick, you probably know more, it's
at an all-time low again. Yeah.
It's at a critical, if it doesn't start to come back, they won't be able to generate power from Lake Powell.
That's right.
And I believe that I'm even seeing videos about the risk to Hoover Dam because there's not enough water to put pressure on the dam that they engineered it for.
Mm-hmm.
So the dam could crack because it would fold back in on itself.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting to see in the second, is it the second trumpet judgment where the third of the waters or fresh waters are turned bitter or turned blood, one of those. But there's going to be a time inside of the tribulation where water is going to be scarce. So all these systems that demand a whole bunch of water are not going to work anymore. And the argument for the data centers from an environmental standpoint is something that both conservatives and liberals can rally around. The same thing with like flock cameras and some of these other kind of Orwellian technologies that are being foisted upon us. But
there's an uprising on flock right now, I'll tell you. A lot of people are tearing them down. They're the cities that have put those systems in place are withdrawing them. I mean, there's a lot of public pushback, but there's a company that is quietly who's owned has major investors like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street that are mounting the new camera system, the real camera system inside of signs that are, the ones that project your speed as you're driving by. They're putting cameras in those things. And, that's, I think it's called Axum or something similar to that.
This is Scottsdale, Arizona.
Yeah. This is the replacement. Yeah. So let you go over there and rage while we do this over here. Classic.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, Scottsdale, I think on Loop 101 or whatever, they were one of the first places to put in speed cameras. It was it was not fun to drive through there, and that's been 25 years ago, at least.
Well, Trump had made the point. I can't remember where he said this, but the data centers will factor into the Golden Dome, or they're going to be part of that Golden Dome system that he wants to put over the United States. So if they're going to push the national security standpoint, then they're going to get however many they need to make that, defensive shield a possibility. So I don't know. Beyond that, I just think that it's a good argument for organoid computing and getting technology into the human body by saying, look at how more efficiently the human neurons and the brains and all that process, and for a fraction of the energy. So maybe that's another argument too.
That's kind of
There's a
scary.
resurgence of news on organoid cellular biocomputing right now, by the way. So I don't think it's sustainable. They don't live; those cells don't live very long.
Yeah. So Pete, what if the Golden Dome is erected over the United States and coupled with the license plate readers on the planet or in our country, would it be possible to a direct attack from space on an individual driving a car?
Sure. Yeah, if they're using Flock, apparently Flock is really hackable. I mean, there's a lot of people that are just able to get into it like no problem. So I would imagine that well, a couple of things. One, Musk is trying to, he's going to dual purpose all of his satellites, or triple purpose all of his satellites. So they'll collect solar radiation. They'll provide internet coverage between the Earth and the cislunar space between the Earth and the Moon. And then also they're going to weaponize those things. So if, to whatever degree those satellites are weaponized, I mean, whoever would control that system theoretically could use some type of a directed energy weapon to pinpoint an individual or a house or a car or whatever, and take that. Maybe that technology is still somewhat embryonic, but it's coming. I think it's coming.
Yeah. Wow.
I saw a Israeli system, which was a, I don't know how, Pete, you're a military guy more so than I am, but it was sort of a dropping missiles from satellites at hyperspeed.
They'd be
and it was all AI thing. And there was a big report today. I think it was Netanyahu or Katz, the defense minister, were talking about. Of course, we're in the midst of political situation in Israel, where there are elections coming up in October, and so maybe some of this is not real yet, but it might be hype for election purposes. But Israel was touting about the fact that we've got a whole system that's AI centered on our defense, targets and that type of thing.
Yeah. And remember years ago, this was like I don't know what year, 2011, 2013, somewhere in there, but North Korea launched a weather satellite, and we had all theorized back then that they had put some type of a small nuke in there that if it detonated at the right altitude, I think approximately like 300 miles in the atmosphere, it could create an EMP type effect. And so I'm sure there's satellites up there now that have payloads, nuclear payloads that could execute that exact scenario. And those are going to be like saved for rainy day scenarios. But space is, everybody did laugh at Trump for creating Space Force, but I do think back then he had the foresight to see where a lot of this stuff is going to be moving to. At least the threat of it was going to move to the cislunar space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so maybe we should talk a little bit about AI weapons and technology, because that's a big deal. This article just was published, I think today, in Foreign Affairs. Let me get my screen share here. And it mainly comes out of Ukraine. Transforming the military has changed the war and upended politics. The future of Ukraine's drone democracy. And Ukraine's done some incredible things with these things. Russia's adapting. They're I think they flew a drone in yesterday into a building in Ukraine that was totally AI controlled. And that may have been the first one.
Autonomous.
At least that's what I read.
Yeah.
So comments on this and how it plays into our prophetic scenarios that we're in?
Britt, you were prescient on this at least 2 or 3 years ago.
Sure. First I'm looking at it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Ukraine suspend elections? So they're saying future of our drone democracy, but
yeah, they're in the midst of a war, so they've suspended
so it's
elections.
okay,
But there's
right?
a big push to have elections. There's a big
Okay, then
controversy
it's
in
okay.
Ukraine right now
Right.
about that. In
Um,
Russia, they have elections though, but it's just that the losers kind of, shoot themselves in the back of the head with a rifle twice, or drink a potion and fall out of a building.
So yeah, I mean, we're seeing this battlefield is really what we're seeing is changing exponentially on a daily basis. And we saw back in January, I believe it was, Pete Hegseth put out a memo talking about the name escapes me right now, but they had a project. It was this memo was all about incorporating AI into the U.S. Department of War. And one of the projects that was proposed under that was to be able to gather intelligence on the ground and integrate it into weapons, new weapons, within hours. So this is what we're seeing on the battlefield in Russia, Ukraine. We're seeing adaptation in real time, learning, proposing countermeasures, then countermeasures to countermeasures. And AI is a big part of this because it helps. There's very little. It's very adaptable on the battlefield. So you think about drones and some of the swarms that they're putting out there of 3 to maybe a dozen drones acting in formation. These are going to get larger over time, but they're decentralized. They can move into a territory. They can adapt to the battlefield conditions, lock into a target. So if communication
Autonomous.
is lost, right, they can carry out the target. And we've been seeing this for well over a year, probably a year and a half in the Russia-Ukraine war, where they'll fly first-person view drones into an area, and then they'll say, this is your target, and they'll lock it on. And then if communications are jammed, it doesn't matter. It's going to carry out the mission the rest of the way. And so we're just going to see, well, I think we're in not even the bottom of the first inning in terms of what's coming. This is just going to become, we're going to see larger swarms, more autonomy, better AI. This is not only the future of warfare, it's the present of warfare. As we've seen, U.S. conventional capabilities in the Strait of Hormuz and in the Red Sea have failed against this. Russian and Ukrainian conventional capabilities have failed in the face of all of this. And we're seeing that this is where the future is.
In the Army, decades ago, they came out with a term called the Revolution in Military Affairs, and it's when a game-changing technology or a game-changing doctrine or tactic revolutionizes how we fight warfare. And watching the battlefield in Ukraine is, unfortunately, the way things are going to go going forward. I mean, it's terrifying to me, because nothing that we did in Iraq and Afghanistan would even we wouldn't stand a chance fighting that way. All of the tanks and all of the even the artillery pieces that we put out on the battlefield, all of those are subject to just relentless drone attacks and neutralizing any effect we would have had in the battlefield in the past. That's all gone. So the battlefield going forward is going to be very different than anything we've seen in the past. And on top of what Britt was talking about, they have this concept that we've been trying to develop, mosaic warfare. and taking anything that can be weaponized will be weaponized. And even if you take those drones, you could park them out in a field and just leave them there until something activates them, and then those things will automatically launch and target, and they could be out there for months. They could be, it's like a landmine, almost. And these things would just relentlessly attack whatever they're designed or programmed to attack. So
didn't Ukraine do that? They had drones in a trained car that then unfolded, and the drones flew out. And
yeah, I think it was Scott. I think it was a truck or a train car.
Yeah, it hit
or a
the
container on the back.
parked
Container,
airplanes. Yeah,
right.
The big bombers.
But they launched that because the drones only had a range of a certain number of miles, and they got these trucks full of drones. I don't know how they do this, right up close to the facility and attacked it.
Mhm.
And they're really, I think, causing a lot of damage to Russia economically with, Crimea's cut off. Russia's importing diesel. They have a big, it's time for the harvest. Tractors run on diesel. Trains that get troops to the front run on diesel. They can't do it because Ukraine is just, Ukraine, they're way outnumbered. They'll never be able to win and hold territory, I don't think, but they can cause a lot of problems. Pete, you mentioned Iraq. I mean, the big problem in Iraq wasn't it IEDs along the roadside?
Mhm.
Okay, so put them in a drone. How do you feel about that as a military guy?
I'm telling you right now, it's I'm not a big fan of General Milley, but when I knew him as a 1-star, and he would sit next to me and we'd watch, where I was a night battle captain and brigade battle captain in Afghanistan in 2008. We'd sit there and watch these battlefields going on all the TV screens we would have in front of us. So different air assaults and raids and things like that were going on throughout the night. But he wrote something in 2016 called Miserable, Disobedient, and Victorious. And he basically laid out in 2016, 2017 timeframe that the nature of warfare was going to change forever. And it was not going to be like we would be in Afghanistan or Iraq, where you'd have these bases and you go out on your little convoys or your missions and you go do what you got to do. And then you come back and then you take all your stuff off and sit in your tent and get some food or whatever, take a shower. He said those days are gone. You're constantly going to be on the move. You're constantly going to be hunted. And I think he knew then the nefarious and then the game-changing nature of drone warfare. And I think at the time, Britt was one of the only guys, at least in the prophecy side, that I remember talking about this. But from the Army standpoint, I know that even back in 2016, we had over 100 different kinds of drones, things that could crawl, swim, fly, jump. I mean, any kind of thing, any kind of animal shape or fish shape or bird shape you could think of, they had those kinds of drones then. I can't even imagine where they are today, with all the advancements in technology we've had in just 9-10 years. So to me, drone warfare and the fact that you can throw AI into it now or link them together with some kind of a hive mind to do swarm attacks. To me, it's like watching the North Koreans when they went into the battlefield in Ukraine and they started getting hit with these little drones, and the North Koreans had never even seen these things. They had no idea what they were until they started getting killed like lambs to the slaughter. I mean, it was terrifying to watch it. Just that's just how dangerous these things can be.
Yeah. Wow.
And you mentioned Ukraine taking these drones deep into Russian territory, essentially smuggling these in.
Mm-hmm.
There's something called a K Club. And it's been around for a while, but it's basically a missile that's loaded onto a container and put on a container ship and taken into a port in an enemy country. Looks like a regular container vessel, and then you can open it up and fire at your enemy's homeland. And you mentioned these drones being dropped somewhere. So imagine how these could be exported into a country. It's very concerning because here in the United States, we've enjoyed the distance of 2 oceans and friendly neighbors for pretty much the whole of our existence. But this really sets us up for a whole new type of Pearl Harbor event where we could see drones easily smuggled in for a mass surprise attack at some point. So that, again, this changes everything. What it doesn't change at the moment is, yes, we see Russia reeling from these attacks. Russia is still a nuclear armed power. At some point, we're going to see the sophistication of these drones get to the point that they can overturn mutual assured destruction. We're not at that point yet. But in the meantime, we have a very real possibility, because really, when we're talking about Ukraine, we're talking about NATO and Russia. Ukraine isn't doing all this on its own. It's a lot. Europe is in large part behind this, helping to manufacture these drones and push forward with this. But this has the potential to spin out of control at some point if Russia's pushed too far. It could go nuclear at some point. So this is really, in a lot of ways, reminiscent of the lead up to World War II and what we're seeing with conflicts in Russia, Ukraine, and in the Middle East, and the potential for Taiwan and China. The future from the standpoint of human beings right here, right now, that don't have a biblical worldview is bleak.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the Swiss are trying to reestablish their neutrality and trying to disassociate themselves from NATO, because I think they see this going sideways and they could be caught up in a much bigger conflict.
Yeah.
Wow.
Did you guys hear that? That was like yesterday.
Just yesterday.
They're like,
I
hey,
have
we're
not
not
heard
with
that
these guys.
Exactly.
Okay, so I want to
How
talk
about quantum? Because we
okay,
had some
we need
movement.
to talk about quantum, and I want to talk about Tin Kings. So
Yeah.
go ahead, let's talk about
So
quantum.
just very briefly, there's not much there, but there's kind of a YouTuber scientist that I follow, and we follow, probably most of us here. And she's reporting a lot of research scientists are beginning to come to the conclusion that quantum really cannot be commercialized successfully. And it's just too exotic. It's too rare. It's too hard to stabilize and all that stuff. And I'm of the opinion that the whole quantum thing was never about commercialization and democratizing, quantum computing on behalf of corporations. I think it was about equipping the three-letter agencies with the ability to hack, my opinion. And certainly if you can hack banks and do all kinds of things like that, you could certainly make up for any losses you have just by stealing money away from people. So I think that this narrative of quantum becoming commercial is kind of getting debunked right now. What do you guys think about that?
I agree wholeheartedly. And I've been scratching my head for 6 or 7 years at this point about quantum and all the people that are promoting it, like companies like IBM, D-Wave, it's another one,
Microsoft,
and all of them have come. They built computers for sure as experiments. That's all you can say. It can't get out of the laboratory to do useful stuff. So are they just on a fool's errand? Maybe that's all it was. Maybe they got on the wrong horse and found out, you know what, this horse can't run, or as they say, this dog can't hunt.
I don't agree with that. I think quantum is viable for one purpose, which has already been established, which is massive parallelism in order to break encryption keys. And
I-
so
I-
that is a use case that's already there, and
It
it's
is.
going to get better and more powerful.
It could be that may be the only case that they have for it at this point. But all the public fear that's been put into people because, quantum is going to overtake AI, it's going to be used by AI, take over the world. That's not going to happen that way.
I've always seen it the other way. AI will control quantum by delegating a task, such as go hack this thing,
Yeah.
and it will be done.
Mhm.
Yeah, I see quantum as more of the processing power and the speed, and AI is the analysis layer
Yeah.
on top of that.
That's a good way to put
And
it.
as you said, Scott, we've already seen a demonstrated use case last year in China where some really rudimentary quantum computers were used to hack military grade encryption. And so that doesn't mean that any of this is going to be commercialized, that there's viable commercial products for this, but this is definitely being used by nation states to encrypt and to secure their sensitive materials. And
For giving kind of a perspective on this, Britt, SSL encryption, secure socket layer that's in the browsers that we use all the time, which is an encryption technology, is only 128 bits. It's been standard practice in businesses to use AES, which is a different standard, 256 bits. There are people that are encrypting at 4,096 bits, and they're not quantum proof. And I just think that it's mathematically brute force. It's going to be broken, and when it breaks in one place, it breaks everywhere. So by the person that controls the compute power to do that. So it is. This is definitely a 3-letter agency, or the 10 Kings. This is leading up to that. I mean, it's a controlling entity, a nation state of some kind, and very powerful people will control this. Whoever controls the ability to hack the world will, could effectively disrupt anything that they wanted to, move money, accumulate resources and wealth, and it's a threat that I don't think we pay enough attention to. What quantum computing is actually capable of.
Yeah, I would say too, just about all the technology that we're seeing right now, it seems like we're getting to this plateau, and we're not able to really break through in any meaningful or serious way. And I think that's also part of the Holy Spirit's restraining on not just sin and evil writ large, but how far man will go and how fast he will get to that Tower of Babel moment. So I don't think that we'll get to the quantum breakthrough this side of the rapture, but I do think inside of the 70th week, once the supernatural is unleashed upon the world, I think all of those secrets and mysteries on how to make qubits and how to mass produce them and how to operate a quantum system in room temperature, all the ways that you can do it that way, I think that's all going to be solved. But I agree wholeheartedly that quantum will never go mainstream for everybody to use. It's going to be for the elites to have, and nation states and intelligence agencies to maintain control over the whole world.
So it'll be a niche.
Niche.
Nietzsche. Okay, so let's kind of start to wrap this up. So let's just kind of have a brief discussion on 10 Kings. I just kind of want your guys' thoughts on how is this, do you think this is going to develop? Let's assume we're near the end. And how's it going to come together, and who's it going to be? Is it 10 regions of the whole world? Is it localized someplace? What do you think?
Economic zones.
We already have our region established here in North America, the North American Technate from Greenland to South to Central America. We're on the board already. We don't have a leader, but it's already been identified. Canada's in it, Alaska's in it, Greenland's in it, Mexico, etc. So there's one.
Okay.
I still flirt with the hybrid approach on the 10 Kings, where given the concentration of power and wealth, that the tech oligarchs will somehow have a role in defining what that could look like. I know that I heard Jeff Kinley and Todd Hampson defend the idea that it's actually a sovereign country type of concept. It's a region, and that it's a physical region and not necessarily technology based. The thing, I thought that their argument was very solid. It made me rethink, am I incorrect in thinking that the power concentration of, let's say, the top 10 tech guys that probably have, let's say 20% or 30% of the world's wealth, is that enough to define themselves as a king? And I just get lost in the swirls of my mind at that point. So what do you guys think?
Revelation 17:12, the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. So they're kings without kingdoms. That's kind of an oxymoron. So to me, there's some type of in our case, they would be like these technocracy guys that are billionaires, trillionaires, that have enough money to effectively rule better than, they have more money than some certain small countries, so they have the means and the technological know-how. But I think whatever the crisis is, if it's the rapture or World War III or something, they, most of the governments will go into declare some type of emergency declaration, martial law, things like that. I think if it's bad enough, they could appoint somebody to kind of head up particular locations to be the point person for that area. And whether that ties in with Trump's Board of Peace or I don't know, but I think the Board of Peace is kind of styled, or the 10 Kings will come out of something like that, because those, in order to even get on the Board of Peace, it was $1 billion entry, right? So that's automatically going to limit who can join this. And Trump wants the movers and the shakers. He wants people that can make things happen. If you have $1 billion to throw into this to join the Board of Peace, then you have the money. Money is not an issue for you, apparently, so you could help shape things going forward into the future.
Yeah, if we see that happening, I'm going to hand paint a sandwich board and hand out tracts on every corner that I can get to. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The end is nigh.
And your board will say the end is near, or is that?
Yes, exactly.
Not going to be no creative thing. I want to read you this quote from Bill Gates, because this is kind of, I think, plays into this discussion. This is from the New York Times article. He said he argued for a new international agreements to set clear criteria to monitor and restrict extreme risks like bioterrorism. He said it would take only a few people with access to advanced AI to develop new pathogens. He said that he would happily debate anyone who argued against mandatory reviews of any AI system. This is interesting. That could be weaponized to make new molecules and unleash a pandemic. Mr.
Didn't
Gates
they already legislate a constraint?
Yeah, Mr. Gates added that he was dumbfounded by the kind of voluntary measures that the White House and industry leaders were developing. In other words, no regulation.
Well, I thought they restricted access to some of the precursor chemicals involved in that stuff. To acknowledge the fact that AI could do something very, very bad.
Yeah.
So I
don't see a lot of regulation anywhere, to be honest.
In fact, fact, deregulation is the name of the game right now, as far as AI is concerned and government intervention is concerned. Everybody's talking about it, including people like Sam Altman, but nobody's doing anything about it seriously. And when Peter Thiel, for instance, goes on a rampage with his lectures on the Antichrist, basically he's saying the Antichrist is going to be the people who want to regulate or limit AI. It's like just opposite. Crazy. Okay, so in their mind, they want everything to be deregulated and put into their own hands without any civilian oversight at all. That won't happen easily, but nevertheless, that's what they want.
Right, and the argument they're using is a national security argument. If we regulate, if we hold back, then we leave the door open for China to win this race to develop this. So that's why they're pushing this. And it to me, it's whoever controls this technology. There's the Antichrist, not like what you were saying, where they're saying people that oppose it are the Antichrist. No, it's this is setting the stage for the Antichrist. Exactly.
It really is. And let me just make a blanket statement. The macro trend here that we need to look at a little bit is this business of disruption. This is a favorite word in Silicon Valley, for instance. If you have a startup company that can disrupt an industry like Stripe did some years ago, and other people, the flock camera safety that they did, they only started in 2017. And these companies that disrupt elements or part of society, it's all based on technology and AI mostly now. And we see disruption everywhere in society. I don't care if it's in business, in technology, in the military, in national government, in election systems. It doesn't matter where you look, everything's being disrupted. And that will also include the concept of the nation state eventually. I think this plays into the 10 Kings concept. We live in an age of disruption. Everything is being disrupted right before our eyes. This is hard for people to consider because there's so many facets. It's everywhere. So it's like the sea is rising around us of disruption. And we're talking about all these different things that have been disrupted, from commercial stuff, military stuff, computer stuff, whatever. And this will continue because now the bar has been lowered to get into the disruption business. AI has done that for sure. So the people who can get into a position to disrupt whole industries, it's so easy for them to get a foothold and actually go and do it. Case in point, Flock Cameras, Flock Group, it was called originally. They came on the scene fresh out of college, basically, and they got a hold of a scholarship to join Y Combinator. That's the incubating company in Silicon Valley, and that's where they got their start. So all of a sudden, they had an idea. Hey, let's put cameras up, and they had one client. That's all they had. They got $120,000 from Y Combinator to basically start the company. From there, they got, with networking and stuff, they ran into Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, all the money guys in Wall Street or the tech crowd. They invested billions of bucks into them, and all of a sudden, they're eating the world with surveillance. All of a sudden, that's in just 11 years, 12 years. So disruption is the name of the game at this point. I'm thinking I want to look at every area of society and ask this question. what is being disrupted by the technology, by the technocrats running it, et cetera? What is being disrupted in that sector?
And who's behind it?
And secondly, yeah, who's behind it? But there's so many entrepreneurs, right? Startup people, that they call themselves founders. What the heck? What is founder? You're a founder? Give me a break. Most of these people starting these companies are basically green, snot-nosed kids, barely out of college. Some of them don't even finish college. And they say, I'm going to disrupt the world, whatever I'm going to do. And they have no wisdom about life. They have never had a job in a sense. They had to use physical labor. And this is the class of people now that is going to basically disrupt the world. And they're doing a good job of it. So far, they've done a good job. Well, no, let me erase that. They're not doing a good job, but they're doing the job.
Order out of chaos.
Yeah.
So if we're in that kind of chaos, the elephant in the room is, how close are we?
Exactly. So this disruption is going to continue until, I think, probably until the end, when we see these 10 kingdoms rising up. That'll be the final disruption of everything, when everything gets handed into the hands of the Antichrist to declare himself God, and that'll be the end of all declarations.
Interesting. Well, it seems, I think I agree with Pete. It seems like we've hit a plateau, but it's like the plateau ends at a very steep cliff. And it's just a little push to get it accelerated again. Okay, let's just run around the table real quick. We'll start with, since we started with Britt, we'll start with Britt again, and we'll just kind of final thoughts, and then we'll close it up for tonight. I'll just remind everybody, if you're interested in a different topic, tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., my plan is to live stream an interview I'm doing with Naomi Linder Khan of Regavim. She lives in, I think she lives, well, I don't know where she lives. She lives in Samaria, and she's written an excellent paper on sort of the scam that goes on in the Palestinian communities. She lives near a town that is supposedly Arab, but it turns out that 90% of the people there are activists who hold American passports. And the town has grown tremendously. They have 15-bedroom homes in the community, so they're not suffering. Somebody's funding this, so we'll be talking about that and the settler issue and some of the other things about what goes on in Judea and Samaria tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. on our YouTube channel.
Eastern.
It'll also be available after that, so you don't have to get up early if you don't want to. Or stay up and not go to bed tonight if you live on the West Coast. Okay, Britt, let's start. Let's go around the table, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay. Well, so Scott just mentioned how close are we, right? That's a good question with all these things we're seeing. I would point out this financial system that we're talking about. Patrick mentioned all this tokenization that we're seeing, the digital currencies, the stable coins, all this that we're seeing take place, digital ID, which they're rolling out all around the world. This creates a digital system of tyranny that's really indistinguishable in capability and function from what we read about in Revelation chapter 13, the mark of the beast system. This is unprecedented. No previous generations of Christians could reasonably say the mark of the beast will come outside of the supernatural in our lifetime. But our generation sees a system exactly like it being built and constructed right in front of us. Yeah. You take that in tandem with all the other signs Jesus and the prophets pointed to. Again, previous generations could not point to these signs, yet we can. As Jesus himself, don't take my word for it, but Jesus himself said, when you begin to see all these things take place, know that I am near, I'm right at the door. The big takeaway is Jesus is right at the door. And if you are a born again believer in Jesus, that should fill you with absolute joy, knowing how close we are to his return for the church and the end of the age and the establishment of his kingdom. It should also fill us with a sense of urgency. We should be in deep prayer, asking God to make us alert and aware of every opportunity we have to share the gospel, because those opportunities will come up and we can't let them pass by when they come up. We need to be telling people about the hope we have in Jesus Christ, the peace that we have, and the peace that is available to them. So I would encourage everyone to be in prayer and to be in the Word every day and to be preparing for battle every day and going out battle not against all these worldly forces that we're talking about, but the dark spiritual forces that are behind all of this. And again, look for those opportunities to share the gospel with others. And if you're alert to it, if you're aware of it, then you'll be able to take advantage of it when it comes. And God will give you the words that you need for that moment. But guys, we need to be preparing ourselves.
Britt, that was really strong. Thank you for those words. I want to talk to the Silver Saints out there. These are elderly brothers and sisters. And I heard a comment today from a very dear sister where she said that, the church has forgotten the older generation, the ones that have the experience, the ones that have, a deep understanding of the Word of God that has been in the faith for decades. And also that have a knowledge of what it's like to be crushed and refined and tested and have the battle scars as a testament to their long-running faith. And to my Silver Saints, I strongly commend your role in this season coming up. The person that I was talking to today said to me, I feel marginalized, and I get it. I hear this a lot on my Substack. And I just think that there's something very, very special that you can play a role in if you can contain and process and realize that we're close enough to the finish line. I think our consensus is that we are, that it's worth every effort that you can make to reach out to others, mentor them, take them to coffee, have them over, bake cookies for them, whatever that looks like for each of my Silver Saints that I have been getting to know over a period of more than a year since I've been on Substack, especially, and just really grasp the moment. And I'll speak relatively strong words here, but don't let other people, especially those that seem to be neglecting or looking past you as you pass them in church, define your value to the kingdom and to the body of Christ. Just don't let it happen. So the world in the church, they're busy. Everyone's got their thing that they're rushing to, but I don't want that to be misinterpreted by our Silver Saints that you are not valued and that there is a role, if nothing more than just be the prayer warrior that you have been trained and developed over the decades that you've been walking with Jesus. Your words in prayer have more impact than you probably realize. And so I want to encourage, the elderly, and I'm quickly approaching that apex. Patrick, you and I probably the oldest ones here, actually. So I just think that I see this happening. I hear about it happening, but I'm upset that the church is negligent enough not to put better support and care into those that have gone before them in the faith, and that whose shoulders they literally stand on. And it's just a disservice. And it frustrates me a lot. But I want the Silver Saints to realize that your calling is probably more viable than mine. Please don't give up in engage, do your best. Many are physically and medically limited to a lot of the things that they can do. I understand that, but there's still a place for you, to have ministry in this season. And we all want that because we're seeing the finish line and we want to finish well.
Well, I'll just kind of piggyback off you, Scott, that I think at the Bema judgment, a lot of these Silver Saints are going to be decked out like Mexican generals. I mean, they're going to be, you know what I mean?
That's a great picture.
So certainly I wouldn't be here if my mom didn't pray for me and on and on. The little old sweet ladies at church praying for me and stuff. So I can echo that. I would just say, if it's possible, I would start pushing back a little bit at the churches. If your church is completely tone deaf, they're not talking about any of this stuff at all, ever. Maybe ask, can we set up a separate night? And I don't remember if it was Billy Crone or it was Brandon Holthouse, was one of the two said this, that, by going to churches that refuse to talk about eschatology, because we're going there because it's close or it's convenient or there's family or whatever. But the fact that we keep going to these places, it's like empowering them not to teach anything on this stuff. And I'm not saying that every service has to be about prophecy, but they should not shy away from it when it's important and when it's prescient. They don't want to appear tone deaf. And I mean, church the day after October 7th, and your church is not talking about what happened. Even the day after in 2023, we're talking about it. It's just like, we just got to stop being so complicit with the churches that we go to, and myself included. I've just started politely and gently pushing back a little bit and saying, hey, why aren't we talking about this stuff? This stuff's important. And I've had two pastors tell me already, like, well, I didn't even know. Nobody's ever said anything to me about it. So that's what's prompted me to tell you guys now, if you can, politely, respectfully, start asking, hey, when are we going to get around to talking about this, and this, or, whatever? Can we carve out another night that we could do this, or another time, if it doesn't fit into your sermon schedule? So I would just ask people churchgoers, if they go to church, if they're not, churches are not teaching on this stuff, to push back a little bit, but respectfully and gently. And just remember, all this chaos and stuff going on in the world, our citizenship is not here. Our citizenship is in heaven.
Amen.
And the fact that what Britt mentioned earlier with Revelation 13, the fact that we're seeing all this stuff, the fact that it's even there included in Revelation 13 and Revelation 17 and 18, is that God already has this stuff mapped out. None of this is a surprise to God. He saw all this coming from the beginning. So the fact that we're seeing it now should encourage us that our departure from this fallen world is all the sooner. So just keep looking up, lean into the storm, and embrace the suck.
I like it.
Good word.
Exactly. I can capitalize a little bit on this business of pushing back in the church. We're facing this right now ourselves personally, where we're thinking about going to a church that doesn't emphasize these things, or it doesn't talk about them much. And it's important, if you feel that strongly about it, go and talk to the pastor, not the underlings, but talk to the pastor directly and frankly. Why don't we talk about these things? Because these are important in society. One of the things I mentioned earlier, that we're being disrupted all over society. The church is not immune to disruption, evil destruction, the evil side of disruption. The new apostolic reformation crowd, the Dominionist crowd, well, I won't go any further than that. That's enough right there. The music crowd, they've become disruptors to formerly evangelical Bible-believing churches who formerly held a favorable position on creation, on Book of Revelation, prophecy, etc., and everything in between, a balanced view of the world. The faith of churches have been disrupted around the country, probably around the world, but our country especially, where churches are falling into the Laodicean model of the church, where there's a sign on the door, but Christ is on the outside trying to get in. And so these churches in America have been disrupted. That's my point. Our role at this point is to somehow disrupt those churches, if you can, and bring them back to center again. And if you don't do it, who will? I mean, at this point, we have a dearth of non-believing churches in a sense in Phoenix, Arizona. I run into people all the time. They say, I wish I could find a church. I don't know what church. I don't have a church. Can you recommend? People are looking for churches, and this is a 4 million population city, and there's no churches. Well, I'm sure there's a few, but what I hear from people all the time is, and these are believers, and they're listening on video, for instance, to people like Brandon Holthouse or Tom Hughes or others, listening to messages that edify them, but they can't find a church. This just tells you what's happening here. We've been disrupted in America. The American church has been disrupted. Don't lose heart just because of that. But maybe if you can take a church and steer them back to the center, get rid of all this nonsense and turn them back into the Word of God, that would be a great service for your community and for the other lives that are around you to do that.
Okay, great. Well, everybody, I appreciate these guys a lot. I hope you understand that. And we appreciate all of you taking the time to listen to us. We'll be back in about a month, I guess, with the next roundtable. If we ever do one earlier than that, you'll know, what's going on. That should be should kind of get you quaking a little bit in your shoes. But there are links in the show notes where you can follow everybody. And I know everybody's got speaking engagements coming up, and I think Pete's going to be here in Ohio near the end of October, up at the lake. So check those out, and you'll see those on their websites and everything. So everybody, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Have a good evening, and thank you very much.
God bless.